One.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just wanted to take a couple minutes to welcome everybody to UAA today. Today we are in, this session is titled Sick and Tired, Best Practices for Advising Students with Chronic Pain and Illness. I'm going to turn the time over to our three presenters. We have Scott, Lene, and Julie. I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to them.
Thank you. Thanks you so much, Craig. Yes, welcome, and thank you so much for coming to this session. We know you have a lot of wonderful things to visit and to learn from at UAA, and thank you for taking time and being interested in this population. I'm not seeing our slides, so we will continue on as, oh, there we go. Now I can see them. Let's go ahead and introduce ourselves so at least you'll know who we are. Lene?
My name is Lene Valentine. I work for Counseling and Psychological Services at BYU. Before that, I worked at our University Accessibility Center at BYU.
Scott?
Scott's muted.
Well, I can go ahead and introduce. So Scott is our director of the Academic Support Office at BYU, where we work with individuals who are struggling for whatever reason, some of which are chronic pain and illness. Scott also is a psychologist by training. And that makes me default Julie Priest. And like Scott, I also work in the ASO, and my background is as a psychologist, and like Lene, I also have worked in disability services and also counseling and psychological services. And I have to say, for transparency's sake, probably like some of you who are listening in, I graduated from university with more than my diploma. I graduated with chronic pain and illnesses too. I would also like to do a shout out to a couple of psychologists, Max Swenson and Mike Mon from USU. Woohoo! They took a risk a long time ago when we co-created a group for students with chronic pain and illness at BYU's campus. And some of the stories we'll be sharing and some of the experiences today are with permission from those students over the years, so thank you. Now, we know that chronic pain and illness is a mouthful to say, so we are going to shorten it to CPI. So when you hear us say that, you'll know we'll be talking about students with chronic pain and illness. So what we'd like you to do, if you would, is consider your individuals on your campus and your caseload. What kind of individuals, what kind of illnesses do you think these folks bring on? Do we have that slide, please? If you can go ahead and have a look at this. Are there any surprises here for you? It kind of looks like people in a doctor's waiting room, doesn't it? All kinds of illnesses and pains that people can have. The one thing that we wanted to make you aware of from a national point of view, that when you have individuals in your office that maybe have chronic conditions such as paralysis, hearing or visual impairments, even if they were created by a chronic illness, or even if they have chronic pain, these individuals are actually referred to as individuals with disabilities, which for me is a good reminder that please, if we have students in our office that clearly are being impacted by a CPI and some form of life function is being impacted, like learning or working, please refer them to your disability services on campus. They may find really good accommodations that would help them. Now, we wanted to give you a sense of kind of what you might see on your campus. So the American College Health Assessment is conducted twice a year. And in fall 2020, this was sent out to 22 institutions of higher ed, throughout the United States, and 13,500 students were surveyed. And they were asked, in the last 12 months, did you seek a medical consultation about any of the following? Now, these folks are saying they sought consultation, not necessarily that they were diagnosed. If you'd like to go ahead and look at this, is anything here surprising for you? Is anything different than you'd imagine? As you can see, there's a wide variety of different illnesses and pain that people might experience. And it does kind of look low, 7.2%. But if you think that you have 100 clients, that 7 of those might be experiencing pain, or that you might find, for example, 17.5% of individuals, so maybe 18 students might have asthma. Does that change how we might do things? The perfumes that we wear, the way we clean our offices, the way we position things in our offices. And we hope to talk about this as we go through. So the one thing that comes up is, well, is mental health also part of this? And that is a great question. What we know about individuals with chronic pain and illness is that there's also an overlay between mental health. So we're looking at about 30 to 50% of individuals that we are working with will not only have a chronic illness, but will also have a mental health concern, such as depression or anxiety. If we could see the next slide, please. And the reason why that is important, you might think, well, of course, that makes sense. It's awful, right, at any age to feel unwell all the time or to be fatigued. But there's also another physiological reason, and that is that depression and actually pain share the same neurological pathways in the brain. So that's why you might be meeting with someone with depression that also has headaches, back pain, stomach problems, and vice versa. So these are very interlinked. If you consider that some psychological disabilities can impact our physiology, our metabolic rates, our blood pressure, something to be considered, that we're all a lot more complex than we think, right? Also, something to be aware of, that 25% of us that have some form of CPI will also have multiple kinds of physical issues and complaints. Now, what we would like to do is we would like to give you all an experiential exercise. And if we were in person, we would be handing out toothpicks and you'd wonder what we were doing. So this actual exercise was created by a woman, a college graduate, who wanted to simply explain to friends and family members what a day in her life might be like. So I'd like you all to imagine that you have 12 toothpicks. And these toothpicks represent people's energy, vitality, the vim and ver, and the going on to it, okay? And those are specifically perhaps given to individuals as they go each day. And when those batteries of energy are spent, so are we. And typically 12 is what each human being needs. Now, I'm going to go through this with Lene. And Lene is going to tell us what her day might look like and be like as a healthy person. I, however, I'm going to start taking some toothpicks away from her based on what a person with physiological disability or illness might feel. So feel free to join us. You can see how many toothpicks you give throughout the day. All right, Lene, are we ready?
Ready.
So what happens? Tell me about your day.
The alarm goes off and I decide if I'm going to sleep a little longer or just spring it.
Okay, so that kind of sounds like most of us, right? What we know with individuals with CPI is sleep often eludes them. It's really hard to sleep when you feel ill or when you've pain or when you have to keep running to the bathroom if you have an inflammatory bowel disease. Oftentimes, as with people with depression, they have issues falling asleep, staying asleep. So waking up, they also may have to stretch or just lay there for a while. So students have told me that waking up alone is worth 2 toothpicks. Takes that much energy for them. Okay, then what, Lene?
Once I get up, I go to the bathroom, brush my teeth, and take a shower.
Okay, like again, many of us. Most students have told me that if they get up, clean their teeth, go to the bathroom, they have to come back and lie down for a while or recline somewhere. Students have told me that they've even had to get out of the shower halfway through just to regenerate and start feeling that they have some energy again. So again, just those simple things. I would say 2.5 toothpicks.
Okay. Next, I get out of the shower, dry off, and figure out what I'm going to wear that day.
So anytime with somebody with CPI, because of brain fog and the energy it takes to figure out what to wear, that's going to use extra energy and space. So 1.5 toothpicks.
Okay, once dressed, I figure out what I'm going to have for breakfast and even include what I might take onto campus for lunch.
Now here, students have told me they will often go hungry throughout the day because there are issues about prepping for food. Individuals have told me they try to use the weekend, but often they're trying to regenerate during the weekend. So sometimes food doesn't get made. Others have told me the refrigerator is too hard to open with painful hands, or a jug of milk or cereal is too hard to get. So the actual embarrassment about actually asking for help from a family member or roommate can be catastrophic in terms of getting food. Also be aware that students have warned us multiple times that standing in lines at your university cafeteria can be really energy draining. So I think another 2 toothpicks there, Lene.
Okay. Then I get my backpack with all my books and things, or my bags that I can take my lunch to campus with. I get all of that ready, my purse, my car keys, my phone. I get all that stuff together that I'm going to need for the day and take it out into the car and drive to campus.
Issues here. Many students will continue to use the backpack. And oftentimes with people with CPI, that can be devastatingly challenging, right? It causes all kinds of extra pain. So you might ask why these students don't do a rolly bag. The one thing I found, my friends, when I started doing research on this group was that individuals, when psychology and self-efficacy and who they are is pitted against physiology and limitations, psychology and self-efficacy will always win out. Students have told me I don't want to be different. Also, sitting in a car, people tell me it's anxiety provoking. If they have inflammatory bowel diseases, how many times do they have to stop to use the restroom? Other people, if they're walking, by the time they get to campus, 3 toothpicks of energy has been used.
Okay. Then once I get to campus, I look for a parking space as close to my first class as possible.
So that should be pretty easy, right? Well, a lot of our students will have temporary, or if it's chronic, they will have permanent disability decals. Very, very difficult. People talk about the embarrassment. Some students have told us they were hissed by others as they walk past or challenged on whether or not they have a disability. Emotionally, that is going to be at least a toothpick.
Okay. Then I walk to my first class and look for a seat.
So for students, most parking lots aren't directly by buildings, right? So they have a bit of a walk. If the disability door openers aren't working, they've got to open them. If the elevator isn't working, they're going to go up. That's about 2 toothpicks. And then the anxiety, are they going to have the chair they need to sit in? That's going to be another toothpick. So 3 toothpicks. How are we doing?
I've used my toothpicks. They're all gone.
That's just an experiential exercise, but bear in mind, that's what students have told us. They're already spent and they haven't even listened to their first lecture. What we'd like to do is show you some voices, let you hear some voices of some individuals with chronic pain and illness. This is a short clip from the British Broadcasting Association. It's on women with chronic pain and illness, and we do realize For those of you that identify as male, the gentlemen also have chronic pain and illness as well.
My pain is like red hot lava radiating through my whole body.
Most days I feel like the Tin Man, but also like I'm getting pounded with a hammer all over. It's almost like there's too much for my senses to handle. Sometimes it feels like there's somebody out there who has a voodoo doll and they're stabbing me all over, in my legs, in my arms, in my back. The pain is like a cage or a lattice underneath my rib cage, pushing outwards through my ribs, trying to push its way out of my body.
I often feel like I'm not in control of my body, like I'm being controlled by an evil puppeteer who's tied knots in my muscles and pulled my strings really tight, and it really hurts.
It feels like I'm carrying 2 massive, heavy buckets of water in each hand every minute of the day.
Thank you, Scott. As you can hear, it's not easy, and some of us know that very well. There is another, there's another piece of information we wanted to give as well, as you listen to those women. This is actually the same sort of thing, but in visual form. This is from an individual in one of our chronic pain and illness groups, and the exercise was, draw yourself, please, in relationship to the pain. Have a look at this. I realize it's small, but what do you see? What goes along with what the women just said? Feel like we're being manipulated, we're being overcome. And members in the group reflected that and said, wow, it looks like you're screaming through this volcano eruption of lava. And the woman said, oh no, you've got it wrong. That isn't me. That's part of the pain. You can't see me. I'm in the picture, but you can't see me. People said, well, what's the thing under the arm then of the pain? And the student said, well, it's actually a shield, and it protects against any kind of treatment that I might receive. So think about that. A person in pain, but no matter what they do, they don't seem to feel relief. Think about what that might look like in your office or in the classes that they go to. Lene is going to change tracks a little bit now and give us some more data and some more ideas of what our students might experience. Lene.
Okay, this slide you can all look at and read. It just gives some prevalence of chronic pain and illness, like 1 in 5 people experience it worldwide, 35 million in the US. You can see how chronic pain affects people with all kinds of diseases, can be combined with those diseases like diabetes and cancer. 29% of men between the ages of 18 and 29, or 2.9%, sorry, and 17.9% of women. So that kind of gives an idea of the prevalence. And the next slide will show us how the prevalence in college-age students particularly. Undergraduate students, 19% of them report having a CPI, 23% of college students reported personal health issues that were traumatic to handle. And again, these are difficult because sometimes they just seem invisible. They're not always obvious. And sometimes they're very unexpected. The condition will flare up. So they have lots of ramifications just besides the chronic pain itself. And then the next slide will show us how some of that interacts, the emotional cost of chronic pain and illness. That, you know, sometimes students can't get to class all the time, so they're missing classes, or they'll have doctor's appointments, or their medication they're taking makes it difficult to concentrate and focus. So they're just not doing as well in school as they would like. So that creates anxiety and depression. They feel like they're not really understood because sometimes it doesn't look like there's anything wrong. They look perfectly okay. They often feel isolated and hopeless because they don't want to be a burden to others. They don't want to always be telling people they're in pain. They feel like their relationships aren't always the best because sometimes they have to withdraw. They often feel isolated, and they just don't have the independence they would like to have, and yet still feel isolated. So we're going to show you another video clip, and we would like you to think about what the take-home message for this video clip is for you.
You tried hemp milk.
We probably shouldn't have that.
Oh my gosh, you're so young. No way. We don't look sick.
You look fine.
But right now I'm in pain. Are you ready for this one?
I'm ready.
Are you sure it's not just stress?
Oh my goodness.
Constantly get that one. Always get that one.
To be honest, yes. It
You
is.
know what? It is a stress.
It is stress, but it's also many other factors like my
Yes.
body doesn't work properly.
Stress can trigger lupus. So it's not completely untrue, but it's not the sole reason why I'm sick.
It's like the number one go-to questions. Like, I'm feeling rubbish, feeling bad. Just like, are you stressed about something?
But for the most part, it's because I'm stressed that I lose my eyesight, or say, for example, I can't walk, or if I get the MS hug and it's just like so tight and I can't breathe. I mean, I don't think that happens to.
We've lost the sound. So clearly we've lost the sound here. We'll go ahead maybe and just get out of this. So that's unfortunate, but that's the way it goes, right? And we are talking about life that's unpredictable, right, for folks who have chronic pain and illness issues. So the one thing though, if you consider just the little bit that you saw, what did you hear people saying, right? They're letting us know that there's issues, that stress does impact their illness, but they're more than their disease, and the disease brings enough challenges, right? So let's think about how this can be in our offices, what this might look like, my friends. So let's go ahead and have a look at the slide here. So first of all, I think it's important to realize that the symptoms of any illness, and I'm sure many of you, my friends, know this, are not static. So that means they may change, not just from week to week, but from minute to minute. So how might this look like for us in our departments and in our classrooms? So let's take, we mentioned the student who may feel pretty good in a summer after taking a couple of months off, enough to sign up for 15 credits. And you find out that that student keeps withdrawing again and again, and you wonder, why won't that student learn? They simply can't take that much. They're setting themselves up for failure. Or what about the student who gets an appointment and then suddenly seems to ghost us? They're not there anymore. Or they make several appointments and don't come. As human beings, how do we see this? What did we do wrong? What's wrong with them? Is something going on? Well, if they don't want help, and yet in reality, their illnesses alone can bring about this. So let me give you a couple of examples. One is Billy. Billy was in our group. He was an amazing student. He had taken 18 credits a semester in a limited enrollment program and done very well. He also worked in his field. And then between his sophomore and junior year, he became very ill. But Billy, his identity was, I take 18 credits and I do well. And so he kept doing what he'd always done, but not got the same results. And so Billy found that he was failing most of his classes. He was academically suspended. He petitioned, came back, and started doing the same thing. Members of the group got it because they were all on that same road. They helped Billy to understand that Billy was more than the sum of just his grades. That Billy was okay if he took no credits, 3 credits, or whatever. It took a lot for Billy to realize that he was okay. Whenever psychology and physiology battle, more often than times, our self-efficacy wins most of the time. Billy was able to drop courses, start taking 3, and then 5, and then on eventually till he graduated at 14 and 16 credits, because he realized that he was more than just what his stresses encouraged him to believe. The same thing with the student who seems to ghost us in appointments. Some students, for example, they might feel fine at 8 in the morning to set up an appointment with us at 10, but then the pain kicks in. Or if they have an inflammatory bowel disease, they're stuck in a loo on campus somewhere. And we might say, well, why didn't you call us? It goes back to that shame and that stigma. So what can we really do about that? What is our office like to encourage people to be able to share with us that they have these kinds of chronic conditions? Do we try to make it possible for students, for example, to visit with us? Truly, COVID has been horrific for many people and a great trial for many. It's also given us opportunity to reach out to students in very different ways. So I've had multiple students, I know Scott has as well, that have come online within 5 minutes. They didn't need to waste 5 toothpicks walking onto campus this morning, right? They've been able to literally roll out of bed and be online. What a great opportunity. So that means students that probably would have ghosted me in the past have been there. And not only that, since we're dealing with individuals who may find that they have cognitive fog or their ability to concentrate is sort of not doing so well, they can actually go ahead and take notes. Now, I always used to encourage students to take notes and record, right? But now they can. We can Zoom it and I can send them access to a recording, or they just automatically, at least my students have, just started taking notes. If they do that, please ask them to go over what they've written, pardon me, with you, to make sure they've got the right information. Stress can interfere also with cognitive processes. You'll also notice that students have issues with turning in homework or even work for you. One thing I've noticed, if I can work with a student to have them set up perhaps sort of fake deadlines. So if they haven't got accommodations yet, getting them to the accommodations office, disability office is important. But also I might say, you know, I'm going to need the paperwork by, say, March the 20th. What would be a good deadline for you to work towards? And I found that students have been able to do that relatively well. Let's have a look at some other things that we might find. So again, we've got the case of Billy, right? Being overly optimistic in when they can visit with us, but also helping students to grow in confidence as they visit with us, so they can send us messages to let us know that they won't be available to talk with us. I had one student who would send me emails just this last semester that said, I'm having a bad health day today. Can we arrange it for later? Or could you see me tomorrow? And we would keep up this dialogue throughout the semester. I want to tell you a story about another one of our students. I'll call her Annie. And this goes with all the things that Lene talked about, and also about feelings of isolation, loneliness, feeling different from others. So Annie, in her junior year, she also became ill. Annie was able to maintain about 14.5 credits a semester, but her life was very rigid. She had doctor's appointments, she went to school, she came home, and between 6 and between 7 o'clock at night, she went to bed every night. As she got to her senior year, she developed the desire to start dating again. And she'd found a young man that she was interested in a social group that she belonged to. He knew her, he realized that she had chronic illnesses, but not to what point. Annie and her roommates decided that they were going to go to Preference, Sadie Hawkins, to Park City. And it was well arranged. She chose a Friday night, so she would have Saturday and Sunday to recoup, and even did Monday and Tuesday's reading and homework in advance. So if she had to take time off, she would be okay. They had a wonderful time, came back from Park City at about 10:45. but ran out of gasoline. So the young man that she was dating offered to take a tin can and go to Heber, and which is about 5 miles away, get some gasoline, come back, and they could limp along to Heber to fill up. Annie decided she was going to do that with him, and she knew that was a bad idea, but she really wanted to get to know this young man. She said she had a wonderful time there and back, but when she got home that night, she was hospitalized, and she was stayed in the hospital for about 2.5 weeks. When she came back to group, she told of the amount of illness that she had. She talked about how difficult it was for her to pay the bills, and also the treatment that she got, how difficult that was also. However, she remarked that everything was worth it, because for one night in 2 years, she got to be a normal girl. So this for our students is very, very challenging. And again, coming to us and talking to us also becomes a challenge, right? They don't want to be treated unkindly, but they also don't want to be stigmatized either. So that might be one of the reasons why some students, for example, next slide, please, Scott, why sometimes students don't want to go to disability services, even when we refer them. It isn't that they don't need the help, it's they're fearful of it and what that might mean for them. Again, in our office, is there a way that people can stand up, move around? Is there a way that people know that they could take a snack or bring a drink into the office? Do we invite students to do that? And then the last part Lene talked about was that sometimes students may not come if they're fearful there may not be the seat for them. I want you to think about folks, for example, who have a chronic bowel disease where they might have to leave the room very quickly without warning. Students start to become agoraphobic about finding that seat that they need. Do we have a selection of seats in the office? Do we invite students to sit where they might feel comfortable? Scott is going to take over from now and talk a little bit more. Oh, there's one more thing that I want to read before he does. He's going to talk a little bit more about and develop more about what advisors can do. I want to read one thing here that one of our students wrote, because I think it's profound, and I think, again, it puts in her words another voice of the traveler, why a student may not seek accommodations. I just feel like if I was in that situation needing testing accommodations, by going to talking to the teacher, I'm letting the disease take over. I'm not in control anymore. I'm not plugging ahead and doing everything I can do. I just ignore it and keep on going. Students don't know there's a different alternative. Scott. Scott, you're on mute.
Okay, sorry about that. Thanks, Julie. Well, let's talk about some other things that advisors can do to be prepared and to best help students. And one of the first things we wanted to talk about is exactly what we're doing today is to prepare ourselves. So we might start by just educating ourselves regarding some of the most frequently seen conditions on campus. And if we don't know what those might be, a quick call to our accessibility center on campus could probably help us understand that better. So seeking professional development like we're doing today, doing some personal study. We might also do some introspection on what sort of preconceptions or misconceptions might I have about some of these illnesses or people with these illnesses that might influence my advising practices. And of course, we can always consult with colleagues. If we're working with a student that's has an illness that we are not familiar with, we can always go talk to somebody we know, or of course do our own research on that. Another thing connected to this is to become familiar with resources that are available on campus. So a huge one for us on campus here is our accessibility center and the staff there and their services. And if we're not familiar with them, it might be a good idea to call them and ask if it would be okay if we come and stop by and maybe take a tour of their center and find out more about their services, or invite them to a staff meeting in your office. All those things can help us be more aware of what services are available. And that way, when we're working with a student, we can better understand how to help that student connect with those resources and what to expect. A huge one is going to be just becoming familiar with the specific needs of each student. So we might be working, for example, with a student with lupus, and we've known another student with lupus, and of course they're probably going to have some similar symptoms, but of course they're probably going to also have a different experience. And so not assuming necessarily what a person is experiencing, but trying to listen with our eyes and our ears and check those things out with the student. Now, another thing that Julie and Lene have talked about is students feeling isolated on campus. And when I've talked to students before, or individuals with CPIs, one of the things that they've mentioned is part of their daily experience is dealing with the symptoms, dealing with the pain. And of course, that's on their mind most of the day. But they find after time that other people may not want to hear about that all the time. And so because of that, they often kind of, recede into themselves, and then their world, their experience becomes a very isolated experience. And so we might just keep that in mind. And so something we can do as advisors is to try to be aware of how connected are students feeling to campus. How are they connected to roommates, to friends, to peers? And if they're not, how can we help them better connect on campus? Are there clubs? Are there ways we can help them connect with faculty, just so that they can get the most out of their experience and build a support network while they're here on campus with us? We might also consider our office space. Is our office space accessible to somebody that might have mobility needs? If I needed to come in my office with a wheelchair or other mobility needs, could I get in and out, easily? Could I find a place to sit easily? There's actually a concept called universal design, which many people are probably aware of. And part of that, or at least one aspect of that, is the idea that a lot of times when we create an accommodation for somebody that has special needs, actually everybody ends up benefiting from that accommodation. So a great example is right outside my office window, there's a ramp that goes into our building. And all day long, who do I see going up the ramp is, parents with children in strollers, people on skateboards and bikes, little kids, and of course also people with wheelchairs or other mobility impairments. And so the idea is that we might set up accommodations that are going to actually benefit everyone. And I was watching something just the other day, and a really interesting one is actually texting was actually designed for deaf and the hearing impaired, and we can all see how much everybody's using that now. So is there anything in our decor that's inviting, that just is inclusive? And a huge one Julie talked about earlier is, maybe 2 years ago, people weren't offering, Zoom appointments or things like that. Now we probably all are offering more options. Is that something we're making available to students that coming to campus would use a lot of energy to get them here? Julie and Lene also talked about trying to understand why students may not self-disclose, their illnesses. One of them is that they just may not understand how the university system works. Our students, they might be 18 or 19 years old. They're still figuring out the adult world. And as a younger person, often it was their parents that navigated those things, getting those accommodations for them. They also may not even be aware that their condition is protected. I come across that a lot when working with students with invisible disabilities, depression, anxiety, things like that. Often they're also afraid of being misunderstood by faculty and staff, and they don't, as Julie and Lene have both said, they don't want to be treated or seen differently by other people. I remember hearing somebody tell a story about a student on campus who she actually had a heart condition, so something that you can't see, and so she couldn't walk very far, and so she had a handicap placard in her car. And one time she parked in the handicap spot, and people aren't used to seeing an 18-year-old healthy looking person getting out of a car parked in the handicap, and sometimes people would say negative things to her, not realizing that she had a very valid reason to be parking there. So people don't want to be treated or seen differently, and I think we could be sensitive to that. And they don't want to see themselves as needing special help. So as we're working with students, we can kind of combine all this, listen really carefully, be empathizing with students and trying to understand their experience, checking out our perceptions. And if the student has some sort of myths about what does it mean to have accommodations, or, does that making this class easier for me? Students still have to accomplish, all the core aspects of a class. They're not getting out of any of those. And so accommodations are just helping them to be able to meet the core functions of that class. Also considering options when we're scheduling, like Julie's talked about, checking out afternoon versus morning classes. Students may need morning classes because that's when their energy is, or maybe they need later classes because that's when they can kind of get up and get themselves moving. So offering, same thing with our advisement hours. Can we be available to them throughout the day? And sometimes considering, what's going to work for a student. A lot of students come to campus thinking that they have to be a full-time student. Often when I talk to students, they think they have to have 12 credits. They don't realize they could enroll in less than that, go part-time or 3/4 time, just to kind of do whatever it takes to take care of their health and do as well as possible.
Okay, it's also to help understand that they definitely should acquaint themselves with the Accessibility Center, because they very well could qualify for accommodations, and to help them understand that it's okay to advocate for themselves and it's okay to have these accommodations, that they're not getting a free pass. They're still going to have to do the work. And it's just some things that can really help it be more feasible to do the work that's required of them. So some common ones are they can get an accommodation for extra time on exams. If they have if they're taking a medication that interferes with, causes brain fog, or it's difficult to concentrate, then they can have a little extra time. Distraction reduced exams, copies of PowerPoint, audio recorded lectures, some of those very basic ones. I remember having a student who had a CPI as well as some of emotional, and he had several issues that qualified him for quite a few accommodations, probably for all those accommodations on the list. The only one he wanted was front row seating, which we modified to be a seat by the door. He just wanted a seat by the door. That's all he wanted. Every semester he wanted that accommodation. He didn't want anything else. So yeah, there's ways to make it easier for students, and they don't have to feel embarrassed or feel like they don't deserve it, because they do. All of the students, their issues are based on how the student's particular disability limits their functioning inside and outside of the classroom. So all of that is taken into consideration. So I would definitely let your students know that come to your office that they should check out the Accessibility Center. They should definitely advocate for themselves, and to not feel ashamed like they're getting a free pass. They're not. They are getting exactly what they deserve, and these accommodations can make it so much better for them to be able to do their classes in a way that is possible for them.
Thank you, Lene. I do believe that we have some time for questions. So if you would like to answer any questions, well, if you'd like to answer them, go ahead. But if you'd like to ask any questions, please put them in the chat. A couple of things I would like to say is, one thing that I've taken to doing recently is actually writing down petitions, information, petitions, offices, enrollment, withdrawal dates, disability services, trying to put them in a document so I can send them to students, and also I can refer to them as we work through them through a Zoom or in person. And that way the student doesn't have to worry about catching all the information as we talk. And then the last thing I would like to say, besides thank you again for coming here, you're getting well prepared, because coming back to school is a huge celebration, right, for most of our students and us But for these students, there's an extra layer of complexity and fear associated with coming back when your Achilles tendon, your Achilles heel, is basically an altered immune system. Coming back into the place where there's other illnesses can be incredibly fraught with anxiety. So thank you for being part of this and understanding a little bit more. So thank you. So please ask questions if any of you have them. We're happy to answer them.
I know sometimes there's a little bit of a lag while people are submitting questions, so we'll wait here a minute and see if there are any questions anybody has for us.
I guess we must have answered every question you could possibly have then, but also feel free to reach out to us individually if you would like to. If you have some questions that are more personal in nature, we'd be happy to answer those questions as well. And again, thank you very much for attending.
We appreciate it, buddy. Thank you for attending our presentation. Oh. Looks like there's a question there.
Yeah, so the question is, what about HIPAA, about asking about individuals if they have an illness? So my understanding is that I think you can be creative and very HIPAA compliant. Typically, we're covered by FERPA, not HIPAA, but typically the way that we might ask those questions. Certainly, and Scott and Lene, I'm interested in what you have to say. When I'm meeting with a student, because I'm meeting with a student who are typically, is typically an issue, right, with their academics. So I might say, would you help me understand what might have been happening in your world, or what was happening at the time you were taking these classes, or could you tell me your story? Would you feel comfortable? And I make sure that students know that they're under no obligation to tell me anything, but if they would like, I would be happy to listen. And I find that people tell me over time. So while I don't go fishing, I make sure all the equipment's there. So if people want to talk about their story and their history, they can tell me. And sometimes, right, that unfolds over a couple of 3 meetings. Scott, Lene, do you have any thoughts about that?
No, I was going to say, the only thing I was going to say is that it's kind of like what you said, Julie. Oftentimes you can ask a student about something without prying. So for example, asking, if a person, has anything we need to consider as far as your needs on campus or challenges that you're confronting or anything like that. And if they want to disclose, they can. And that's a good question. I'm not familiar with all of the ins and outs of HIPAA. Actually, that makes me want to go look it up and see if there's more to understand there. Looks like there's another question too that asks, I don't know if you can see that one, Julie.
I only saw that one.
Oh, it's under published. I don't know if you.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay. Okay. You mentioned that you suffer from CPI. How do you compensate? I think that is a really good question. And I think everybody does so differently. As far as being a member of a staff in any organization, there's usually some kind of an equal opportunity officer at your institution that you can talk to about any needs that you might have. Oftentimes working with your supervisor is a really excellent idea because they kind of know what you're going through. You still have to do the essential functions of the job, and I hope that I overperform rather than underperform. But you better ask Scott, right?
You do.
But the reality is that I find out that most individuals with CPI in the workplace, particularly at our institution, vastly overperform, and that's the same with students, right? So for me, I'm one of those people that turn up early, sometimes an hour early, to get the seat that I need. I might be the person that works super early in the morning because as it gets later in the day, I get a little bit more fuzzy. It's a little bit more challenging. I'm already making plans and thinking ahead to what fall will look like for me, and have been probably for the past year, right? So it means that a lot of times people with CPI, it's not unusual. We're always living in the future to a certain extent, trying to plan for things that may never happen and keep working as if they will. And so that's sort of how I compensate. I also have very early bedtimes. I'm one of those that's way in bed by 7 or 8 o'clock at night. Boring, right? And I have a lot of people that will say that, well, I wish I could. And my response is, I wish I didn't have to, right? So the way that I've learned to accommodate, it took a lot of practice. I'm still learning, even though it's been years. I'm still learning at what works and what doesn't. And I think your question, though, was excellent, because I think that's also a question that you can talk to students about if they reveal and express this. So how do you compensate? How do you get around this? And I found that students are incredibly honest and will share. So thank you for the opportunity to answer that question. I appreciate it.
Okay, I think that's our time. Thank you so much. That was wonderful. We're going to go ahead and close this. We look forward to seeing you guys in future sessions. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.